Hello, everyone. This is Lori Hanau of Global Roundtable Leadership, and I feel the great joy and privilege of having with me in my shared leadership partnership for today and always uh, the spectacular, amazing Rha Goddess. And I want to also say welcome to the whole community, to everybody listening now. And those of you that will be listening or maybe listening in the future, we want to welcome you here and welcome you in your own wholeness and fullness to this conversation about the great leadership awakening. And Rha, I will turn so that you and I can introduce ourselves to each other and to this space, right? Unplanned and modeling embodied leadership. But first, I just want to say that this is a roundtable dialogue series that Global Roundtable Leadership is starting today, and that every 3 months or so, we'll have a dialogue, and that we're seeing this as a call to compassion, to collective wisdom, to collaboration, and to cultivating caring environments in the workplace or anywhere that we are teaming, which includes collective impact work also, and volunteer work. Organizations and leaders that can nurture this type of regenerative team culture will flourish, is our bias. As global citizens, we each have the opportunity and the responsibility to shift into sharing leadership and power. And we like to think of this as ensembles. Effective teams sharing meaning and creating and collaborating in a state of trust, respect, and in our great diversity of flow. And so welcome, Rha Goddess, and thank you so much, Rha, for being here with me to set the roots of this into the ground and to begin this conversation today around the great leadership awakening.
It's such an honor. Thank you so much, Lori, for having me. Thank you, Global Roundtable Leadership family and community. It's just really a joy to be here. And I know that part of the way that we're going to open this up is the introduction of one another, which I think is exciting and different and often not what we experience. And so for me, the opportunity to introduce Lori to you all, some of you may know her really, really well. Or do you want to go first? It doesn't matter. This is the beauty of being live. This is the beauty of being live. There's so many things, Lori, that I can say about you, but one of the things that I feel is important to acknowledge is, you're well over 2 decades of leadership at the front lines of leadership and holding leaders accountable to a different way of operating and being and working in the world, and that you've been able to do this work in multiple sectors and at various stages of growth of companies, and how important it has been in our conversations, particularly over the last 5 or 6 years, as you've been really cultivating and honing this shared leadership, thought leadership, that we have the opportunity to kind of be in this conversation today as you now begin to share and bring this unique and innovative approach to collective work out into the world. And so just thank you for all of who you are. Thank you for all of the ways that you have led and held space for me as a leader. And just thank you for being willing to share this new way of operating, this new way of being with us.
Hmm. You're so welcome, Rha, and thank you. And I so love and appreciate that you are self-identified as an entrepreneurial soul coach, and that I too, right, having the privilege of being with you, for 8 years in intentional coaching and working and support of you together. But beyond that, just the many years since we've known each other, and all the different ways that our relationship has taken form. But at the root of it all has been the recognition that we had when we first laid eyes on each other, and some deep knowing, and saying yes to everything that we each have invited each other into because of this knowing. And so through that, feeling the kinship and the soul sisterhood between us, I've had the privilege of showing up in so many different spaces that you have been, either on the stage or in some form of platform, the ways that we have opened and closed circles and been in a number of different circle work together. And I just want to name that for those of you out there, if you don't know Rha already, please, please, please look up her bio for all that she has done, including being a best-selling author. She has an incredible course and training, which we'll touch on later, on White Awakening. But again, Rha, in this moment, I want to speak to your personhood, because I do feel that in the Great Leadership Awakening that you are, I think that the reason why I saw you is because you are made for these times, and that you are one of the ones to support a shift into a new story and a new way of relating to leadership, and to work, and how we work together. And I want to just name your courage and your constant bravery and your steady backbone, your integrity, and your willingness to walk your talk. And so how much personal work you have done, inner work or personal work, along with interpersonal work. And so just again, thank you. But I want everyone to know here who's listening, just the quality of the human being that you are, and your deep, deep, deep commitment to your life and to everyone's life, to our global citizenship of these times.
Thank you so much, Lori. I feel that is one of the things that you and I share. Have one of the many things that we have in common is that commitment to our humanity. And so, unto me and to you in terms of the reflection. So just thank you. It's my joy again to be here.
Thank you. And so the Great Leadership Awakening, I mean, you and I have been laughing over, like, we could have days on this, right? And we will definitely be having more conversations. And even the pain and the discomfort of these times and that we are living in, and yet also the precious opportunity that is before us. And I want to start at the macro level and then zoom in to teaming and the workplace. But what I mean by this is I want to start because I feel honestly it would almost be disrespectful to not name and bring into this space Russia's war on Ukraine. And just want to pause on that for a moment. And what this has the potential, and we're already seeing all the ways that this is opening us up as global citizens, and the awakening that this is having on us. I want to just take a moment to name that almost at the Shakespearean level, like we have in front of us the most relevant example between Putin and Zelensky of 20th century leadership and back, and 21st century leadership. And with Putin, I would say, where in my experience there is incredible command and control dynamics going on, reductive thinking of our humanity, underestimating the power of our humanity, right? A tremendous, like, I don't even know if it's in the purview, in the consciousness, but certainly if it is, there's a great underestimation. The small circle of advisors, the tightness, right, of the circle of advisors, or oftentimes in the way we're structured at work, like the small group who self-identified as leaders, and too often, and lacking in trust. So an incredibly narrow thinking and guessing at solutions, and the reduction of trust that's going on. and then with Zelensky, how he is embodied in a different consciousness. So this is right in our face to see the consciousness of his embodiment, right? Like when the US, when we asked him if he wants a ride out of Ukraine, right? He's like, I don't need a ride. I need supplies. I need support here on the ground, like his letting the people know that he is walking with them, that he's walking his talk, he's embodied, the way he's calling to our humanity, the way he's honoring Russian soldiers and citizens, and he's calling to the mothers, and the way he's calling to the countries for us to unite, and what he's doing to call us to harness the power of our humanity. So I've just said a lot, so I'll pause on that, and but just to say, like at the macro level, we are getting a case study and living right now ourselves into what does this mean to us. What does this mean to us? What does this mean to each of us and to all of us get together in the groups that we are a part of? And so, Rha, I just want to now ask you, like, if there's anything that you want to say about that, that I've already spoken here, but also how do you see what's calling in the new leadership so that you start to take us forward? So anything you want to say about what I've already said, and then taking us into the flow forward.
I think it's about recognizing the opportunity to do power differently. And I think that's really what we're seeing the examples of. There's a sort of traditional way in which we know power, which is really about greed and dominance and exploitation. And I see, I want, I take, you know. And then I think these new forms of power that we're all kind of feeling our way into, particularly post-pandemic, and as we are actively on the court of re-architecting and reimagining what this new reality and this new chapter of our existence as a human family is going to be like. I think we're very much aware of the fact that we now have the ability to make conscious and more intentional decisions about who we want to be, about how we want to show up, about where we want to bring our talents and our gifts and our abilities. And I think that every time we see examples on the broader world stage that show us, more of the same versus something new or something different, the people are choosing something new and something different. And I think there's something about recognizing a leader that understands the importance of inspiration and understands the importance of having not only an ear but a heart to the ground, and one that is willing to speak to and speak for the concerns of their people. And I think that we all feel enlivened by that and excited by that, because that's what we want in the leaders we have the opportunity to interact with every day. And I think we all know that our most beloved leaders are often people who we believe think about us even when we're not around, right? Or care about our well-being, or want the quality of our experience to be world class in whatever it is that we're contributing. And I think this is what we're laying the ground for as we think about this awakening.
Yeah. And Rha, both right. Oh my gosh, there's so much in what you said that I just want to pause for a moment. So one of the shifts here that we that we are standing for Global Roundtable Leadership is the call to considering each and every one of us as a leader. Right? That the time of the lone wolf is over, right? Gather yourselves, the Hopi prophecy, and that I often do ask myself, like, we've had this long-term idea of leader, and as people sort of at the top of something, and yet if we think of circles, and the power of what can happen when we share that leadership, and even as individuals, I feel that we are actually deluding ourselves. It sounds way too insulting for what I mean, but it's like maybe fooling ourselves if we don't think that we're leading in every moment with all that we say, all that we do, how we build our relationships, where we're placing our purchases, where we're investing, what we're investing in, who we're investing in. That part of the great leadership awakening for me is and for us here, and I would love you to touch it on this too, is you know oneself as a leader, and then how are we leading with every day in our lives with how we're showing up. And I love, you're the one who really brought out in me like the this phrase from going from passive participants. Sebastian on our team speaks this too, and I'm like, yes, going from passive participants to co-creators.
Yeah.
That how are we co-creating our realities, and how this can play out in the workplace. And then I also want to speak to, and I'd like you to speak to, if you would, the three realms that we often talk about. And I know we language in a couple of different ways, and I think that's really good. I know that I want us to bring our different languages, because I think in our cultural diversity, it's good to speak in a multilingual way about the same things, and to open up our mind and not settle on a reductive language. And so,
Yeah.
why don't you please step in with me here on
Yeah,
this?
yeah. I mean, I think I love everything that you're naming, Lori. I mean, I think this opportunity and this moment for us in terms of seeing our own leadership is being willing to really take responsibility for the life we want, for the world we want, for the environment and the space that we want. And we know that in the traditional definitions of leadership, we've often been told that that's not our place. We've often been told that unless you occupy a particular chair, you have no say, or you have no voice, or you have no opinion, or you have no perspective. But the truth is that if we all recognize, and I believe more and more now, Lori, in this new paradigm that we're forging together, we're starting to really own and take responsibility for the fact that, you know what, I do have a voice, I do have a perspective, I do have something to offer here that could be of value. And I'm wondering, is there a way that we can create and architect more space as we think about our structures that invite those different voices and those different perspectives? And so this is what I think you're naming in terms of this shift and this movement from a place of sort of more singular, more hierarchical leadership to this place of more collective, more dynamic, more shared leadership. And, I think your question of like, well, what's it really going to require for us to say yes to this and lean into this more fully? And the three dimension, or the three realms that you ask about are, this internal work we absolutely have to do. And I do want to say that I think this is a new moment in that we've often not talked about the internal work of leadership. We've talked a lot about the external skill, what you need to build in terms of strategy, what you need to build in terms of fortitude and resilience, but much more of those things are very outward facing. But we've not talked about what needs to happen in the inner realm of our interior, our health and well being, that grows our inner capacity to hold space for the vision or the mission that we're trying to achieve. Right? So the inner work is important right now. We also talk about the collective, right? Which is, I know, so much of where you live in the work of Global Roundtable Leadership and Shared Leadership is the collective work. What is the interpersonal and collective work that we need to do, which is often the work of culture. And then we go one step further out, and it's the systems and the structural work. And we are in a moment where we must, if we're really serious about a new chapter and a new reality, we must be working actively on all three frontiers in order to move us. Last thing I'll say about this is, there are lots of skills and capacities we're going to need to develop in terms of really embracing 21st century leadership. And I want to name right now that we are going to need to be trauma informed, and we're going to need to be power informed. And what I mean by that is we're going to need to understand and recognize that for many of us, work has been traumatic. And we also are going to need to recognize that new definitions of power are going to be part of what gives us access to this opportunity that I think shared leadership is calling for. So.
Yeah. And Thank you so much for what you've named. And Ron, why don't we take a moment and walk back through those again? Uh, because I know that these realms, and you know who's coming in is our sister right now. She's tuning into me in my heart and my spirit, Shilpa Jane, of the whole Yes community, the Yes Jams, right? And the
Yes,
work we've all done
yes.
together, and again the recognition we have in each other, and they are another global community that focuses on the personal. This is her language, the interpersonal, or their language, and the collective or systems change work, right? And we've all, and I'm sure many of you out there listening, have been on um, bringing these realms together, and then I'm going to use the word through the lens of wholeness, that none of this is separate, that the individual work is not separate from teamwork, that they are fully connected and inside the realm of our wholeness. And that, so in this, let's go to the personal, as you already did, and named the inner work that is needed and required, and you named some really valuable reasons for that, and I want to come in with you and name that in my commitment, to look within and to work on myself in you know whatever those forms are, whether it's you know group work, whether it's reading books, arts, walking in nature, making sure I have reflective time, counseling, somatic work. I have trauma myself, and so I've done trauma, a lot of deep trauma work, and how much that has afforded me the abilities to see my blind spots, and 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 how scary it always feels over, like how I've gotten so used to being uncomfortable that I think it calls for the willingness to be uncomfortable and to be vulnerable. And how in I'm going to say, we're kind of using this lingo right now, but 20th century leadership, I think, was about being buttoned up, feeling like we have to be the experts, and it's still floating in, right, to 21st century. But we believe another shift is also happening. But that we don't have all the answers actually, and we can, men can't cry, right? In the earlier decades, and then how women had stepped into leadership and followed suit and all that, and so all the different ways we have dehumanized ourselves, and this call to rehumanize and to humanize, in the workplaces, or in our concepts of leadership, and how valuable and essential it is to start with ourselves, to be willing to do our own inner work as a part of sharing power, as a part of sharing leadership, and how much more enjoyable and creative and brilliant it is, because we're tapping in of the genius of not just any one of us, but the whole of us, right? We start to tap into the genius of our diversity. And so I just want to pause and see, like, that's some of what comes up for me that I want to offer to you and to this community, on the essentialism of inner work. And I just want to see if you have anything else you want to say on that before we move to the interpersonal.
Just that I want to amen, because, I as well, I do it all. I do it all, yoga, meditation, therapy, all of it, and I think we're getting to a place, thank God, Lori, where it is more acceptable to start to talk about these things. I think we're getting to a place where we're willing to bring the words trauma into the zeitgeist and start to really have a more working definition and understanding of what it means and how it affects people. And and again, I think we're deeply grateful for the fact that there is more room and space to start to talk about it. But I want to say that our mental, spiritual, emotional health, however we define it, and I'm not speaking of this in a religious context, I'm speaking of this in a human consciousness context, however we define that, like, our well-being is crucial to our capacity to show up for anything that we want, in our lives and anything that we're trying to accomplish in our work. And so, that inner realm, again, our traditional sort of rules of the road have been to leave that at the door. And what we really want to honor and acknowledge the truth of is that it's impossible to do that. Right. In other words, it's impossible to leave our humanity at the door. And I think we've seen what the consequences of that breed. And so that inner work is about the acknowledgement of your humanity, because once you acknowledge your humanity, you have room and space to be able to acknowledge the humanity of others. And that is what brings forth true connection, true collaboration, true opportunity in the shared context of the work that we're being called to do right now, right, as 360 degrees of leaders. And so I just want to underscore it and say that, our words are finding their ways into the realm of work that were never there before, like healing, like, vulnerability, like, courage, like compassion. We start to talk about new language, and our willingness to embrace these in a professional context, I think, is part of the revolution.
Right. And even through the lens of wholeness, right? That again, it's an illusion to think that we're different, very different at home than we are at work. Sometimes I'll hear people say, "Well, I don't want to get warm and fuzzy." Right. That's my personal life is at home and my professional life is here. And again, that's a grand illusion, but one we cannot underestimate our conditioning, the power of what we've been conditioned and habituated into. And we'll hopefully have time to touch on a little bit of that later. And I know you said the spiritual, emotional, and mental realms, and I'm just coming back around to that because I know you also mean the physical. We talk all the time about the somatics, right? And the wholeness of those realms, the wholeness of the spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical realms. It's back to being whole, and and honoring the different parts within that wholeness, and. And as you're saying, how this is new in the workplace, and yet I find we are so starved for this work. And so to shift now into the interpersonal, there's so much more to say. And then also, by the way, everyone, we have a place here for if you're in chatting anywhere, please bring any questions you have, any comments you have. And Travis Hellstrom, who's on the Global Roundtable Leadership Team, I'm just inviting you. I know you're on mute right now and your video's off, but whenever you feel that it's right timing, we don't have to wait like to the end of anything. Like, come on in if there's a question or something that you think is relevant that you're seeing in the chats. But please, everyone out there, please bring your voices to bear with us now and as we go into the future. And I just want to name, as we shift into the interpersonal realms, that here at Global Roundtable Leadership, we are defining shared leadership as the practice of bringing out the greatest capacity in everyone. So everyone in the team or the organization, or again, it doesn't have to be bricks and mortar, but in your community, and by empowering all of us to be responsible for and engaged in the well-being and vibrancy of the whole. So again, bringing out the greatest, that we're all responsible for bringing out the greatest capacity in everyone. And by owning, right, or empowering or owning our agency to be responsible for and engaged in the well-being and the vibrancy of the whole. And that this is a fundamental shift in how we understand and apply wise power and effective leadership. And I just, as that we're arcing in from the personal to the interpersonal, I want to name wisdom and how our capacity for wisdom resides in our capacity to reflect and to take a longer view, to be able to zoom in and zoom out, take a longer view and a shorter term view, and hold the wholeness again, and get to the depth and substance of ourselves or an issue or a dynamic, right? And which can go beyond the other forms of our intelligence. And we do name that the collective wisdom and the power of us in our teaming is so essential, and that this is that interpersonal, that the groups. And I'm always thinking, about how do we not turn into mobs, or how do we not, in work language, go to the water cooler to bitch and grouse about each other, right? But what is the
Mm.
commitment to support, like, and this is why we bring in the ensemble thinking too, like the commitment where respect and trust is not something we're reaching for, but we realize more and more is the ground of our under our feet of being human. And how do we build these muscles in interpersonal way? So I'll step back now. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think, what it raises for me is, the research that we did as part of our Women's Initiative
Oh, and please talk about
information,
this. Bring this in.
and this idea of lived experience and the degree to which our lived experience also has the opportunity and the potential to be a welcome part of our leadership. And our lived experience that is not just simply rooted in the jobs we've done, but rooted in the things that we've journeyed through in our humanity. We talk a lot about this with the women, like what has it been like to be the first in your family to come into a new country where you don't speak the language and you've got to find your way and learn how to navigate and be successful in a whole new world. What is it like to raise three children as a single mom while you work and go to school? And these are all other examples of leadership that often are not in the conversation, but so desperately need to be in the conversation. And I'm giving two examples, but we all can think in our own lives that there are things that we've navigated. There are survivors of cancer out there, and what have they learned in the context of leadership in terms of health and well-being and being able to transform a situation or circumstance or navigate sustained discomfort. Um, and what that breeds and builds in terms of inner character and wisdom and fortitude and capacity and perspective. And so I think our opportunity to really unpack what's available when we call on the power of collective wisdom beyond the role, I think is the opportunity to have access to a wealth of knowledge and perspective and information that can only contribute to being more successful in whatever we're endeavoring to achieve.
And one thing that keeps me heartened, in today's world is 201. Any group that has reached out to us, or team that has an interest in sharing leadership at all, like any interest in these ideas of what does it mean to share leadership, power, meaning, and responsibility. The interpersonal, as you're talking about, like how do we build that? They don't have to be like like it's just across all the sectors. I'm just seeing such a thirst that's rising. Like they may not self-identify as like a B Corps or a triple bottom line, business, or uh, we're seeing it everywhere. For profits, not for profits, collective impact work, volunteer work, like just the teaming of what does it mean to come together in this a way that I think is starting to dawn on people is both something very old and primordial, because we're parts of nature and we are made for this kind of collaboration and cooperation. Like if you want to look into that, just study for a moment, like just check out what our organs do to collaborate with each other and with our heart and our water and everything to make these bodies function so with such brilliance, right? And that we're made of this intelligence, and yet we have been structured, which gets to the systems, the third and aspect, the personal, the interpersonal, and the systems. The systems lens is to understand that we are these larger systems, just even our own bodies, and then every time we come together, we're creating a system. Any workplace is a system. I think that the coronavirus has probably given us as global citizens the best education on what it means to live in a larger system where one thing can come over and shut us all down. but because and we're a part of that living system. And what has heartened me so much and makes me even braver, I think, every day is the thirst to practice these behaviors and the thirst to practice them at the individual, team, or collective and systems or large, organizational level. And so I want to name that, and I want to take maybe 5 minutes to talk about what gets in the way of this consciousness, and then I want to maybe talk about that, and then come back here to practice, like the practice. What does practice even look like for teams? But wow, I just want to name how inspired I am by the thirst of people to want to work in these ways with greater cooperation and compassion and bravery and authenticity and diversity, like where our diversity is central. And yeah. So I'll step back now and see what you want to
I
say
think
about what
we're
I've said
building.
and also what gets in the way.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we're building skill here. I think this is the place, to your point, I think people are hungry and thirsty for this, even if they don't know how to ask for it or what the language is. People know they're trying to get to a new place in their own leadership. People know they're trying to get to a new place in the cultures of belonging that are being forged in companies right now. And again, people are along the continuum in the journey of moving towards what or discovering what true inclusion and belonging mean. But I think this idea of how do we do the work together? How will we live together? How will we work together? How will we be together? Is the fundamental question. Um, and again, being willing to allow these kinds of questions into what has been a traditional space where they've not been as welcomed or not been as allowed, I think is part of what we're seeing. I think the structural and systems piece is incredibly important to name because the containers that we've currently been operating in are insufficient for what it is that we now want to be moving, right? And so, what we find shows up often in terms of what gets in the way is we have an intention, a desire of what it is that we want to do or we want to operate, but the structures have no room and space for that intention. And so there's often tension and conflict and competition for, right? And so, when we're pulling from and drawing on structures that are holding sort of old definitions of power, there is an either or way of operating. There's not a lot of both and in the equation, right? Or there are ways of operating that we know feel inhumane, but we feel at the mercy of the protocol or the mercy of the procedure. And so that we can't freestyle in ways that invite more of our humanity because there's a concern about the rules or the structure or the way things are done. Because we believe we're at the mercy of these things. We don't recognize fully or take full responsibility for the fact that we can change them. We hold these structures as permanent and rigid and fixed. And because we hold those structures in such that way, we feel often very powerless to actually affect them. The other thing that gets in the way is this need for speed. And, you know, in this sort of culture of busy or efficiency, what we call or what we believe to be efficiency, which is often really flattened humanity or flattened opportunity, right? And that because, we want to do the right thing or we want to do, but we don't have time, or we want to treat this a particular way, but we don't have time. And everything is supposedly at the mercy of this manufactured sense of urgency that we're operating inside of. And I know that this is a very provocative statement because a lot of people will fight you for their sense of urgency. Um, but this is part of the work. This is part of the interior work that then, cascades into our collective and our systems work is that, we actually could go faster if we slowed down. We actually could move farther if we slowed down. And so, again, I think. I think these things that put us at odds and really stand in the way um, have everything to do with our perceptions of what success requires. And I want to say, I think that is the biggest opportunity in terms of as we look at and discern what systems and structures will serve versus which ones don't, is to really mine into what is success really going to be for us in this new paradigm? And are we willing to challenge these old notions of what we think is required of us in order to be able to accomplish what it is that we're looking to accomplish? Courageous leaders who are really willing to step forward and say that I am willing to upset the apple cart. I am willing to forge new systems and structures. I am willing to invite new wisdom and intelligence in order to create this new vision for what it is that I want. And I think when, I think about the examples of what we see with companies and all of the conversations that we're having, anytime CEOs have made that commitment and made that declaration, people are energized. People are excited. People feel a sense of permission to offer and bring these new solutions. People feel the opportunity for innovation as being very, very ripe. And so, I think that part of what our work is to do across the board as we start to think about how we address these systems or how we address these structures, or as we think about the challenges that do not enable us to do that, is to recognize that we are going to have to continue to go to work on leadership. And I think Lori's coming back here to maybe share more about the example of the Maciello group and just the way that they've leaned into the work of shared leadership and really committed to having their entire organization reimagine the systems and structures for how they lead and how they organize and work as a community. And so, I'm curious, and in terms of folks who are out there, like, do you find that there is this challenge for you as it relates to your leadership, and how do you have those conversations that invite new space? Is that I just posed a question to those who are listening, like, about this idea of leaders, and that we see as well in our examples, organizational examples, when CEOs lean in, the whole organization becomes energized by what's possible. And so maybe you want to talk a little bit about this example with Chris and
Yeah, that Chris, and throughout the system, right? But somebody has to start, and this is another part of what gets in the way. What gets in the way is, I will say, in the for-profit language, the executive C-suite or the executive leadership has to start. No matter where other forms of power may be, it's an illusion to think that that it's going to begin in some other way if it doesn't start with the executive leadership team, and the willingness to go first, which is also a practice of the ensemble, to step in, to be vulnerable, to be willing to learn and grow, and to do that overtly as a team, not just as individuals, but as a team. And the ignition that happened with the leadership team, and then now for the last year, we've been working with all the employees, and to see how within a few weeks of being in practices of sharing leadership and sharing power, um, and responsibility, how the roof is coming off the place, the genius that's showing up, the making space for each other, the best practices, the um, even the people speaking about trauma and how they're afraid to believe that this is true here, that we could work like this here, and build safety. And so, I think one thing that gets in the way is that the leadership team has to be willing to take this on. I think I'll just say a couple more and then we'll pivot. I think what you said about speed, right? And my favorite, the African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. how the slowing down, it's the rabbit in the hare, for anyone who knows the Aesop's, children's stories, but the illusion of, the ability to not just slow down, but to temper, to modulate, to know the wisdom of when to go fast and when to slow down, but that relationship is built at the speed of trust, and that we have to slow down in order to build quality relationships, which builds the trust within a group, and the respect and the creativity can flourish, right? And so this also means making space. When we're at speed all the time, we have no space. We have no space to think, to reflect, we're not making space for each other often. Those are just a few essentials for me in what gets in the way. And I'll just name one more is, um, I find in my experience when we go into organizations and say, what's the healing story? What are the healing practices? What happens if you practice no diminishment of yourself and of each other as your first group practice? What is the healing that happens there? People don't say to me, oh, that's woo woo, that's this or that. Like they drink it in. Like we're healers. Like we're these healing machines, or healing. I don't want to use mechanistic language. See, that was my conditioning. But we're made of these living systems, and so the healing capacity that we have and how we can thrive in the realm of relating through what does it mean to be well within ourselves and with each other, and what is the healing that creates those conditions? What are the activities and the actions? I know we're going to need to wrap this up really soon. I just want to know, is there anything else that you want to say to that or to anything else?
Well, I just want to underscore that, part of the what gets in the way is our belief that this work is optional as opposed to integral. And, our creating room and space for this essential integral work, and the belief that one can achieve what one wants to achieve by creating more room and space, because there, it feels paradoxical in the thinking, right? Because everything that we've been conditioned to believe is, oh, you need to streamline it, and it, needs to be, again, the sort of, you know, cry to efficiency, and efficiency has its place, right? So this is not about being mad at efficiency. Um, However, my experience is when you have trust, oh, you can be real efficient. Versus when you don't have trust, I find that efficiency struggles, you know what I mean, and suffers. And so I think there's this opportunity to really recognize that the opportunity at the foundational level to start to integrate these practices actually gives you more of what you want in terms of your success and your vision and your mission and what you're trying to accomplish and achieve. And so, again, this either or versus both and thinking is one of the things that I also feel we're going to need to work through in order to create greater capacity to really embrace these
And
practices.
it is the inner capacities, right? It's not the skills, as what is the capacity we have to be willing to look within, to to develop in these ways. And I want to name to that, how we relate to time. And I was in a room once when someone, his name is Alan Weiss, he said, you know, I'm tired of hearing people say, I'm losing tolerance for hearing people say, I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. We have all the time in the world and all the time that we need with the choices that we're making again. And I just find that anytime a group makes the time to weave this in to their work and ways of thinking and being, like what become, like how much there's expansion of one's mind, of one's heart, there's expansion of the teams, there's expansion in the health of the whole organization or system, and then the genius just starts pouring in. We are filled with genius, and I think we tend to forget this. And so these are ways. I hope that we've been in dialogue in a way that has given some ideas for the reimagining of leadership and the touching on the reimagining of the workplace. Again, there's so much, this dialogue will continue. Whether we have time for even one question, I know that we have to wrap this up, but Travis?
Yeah, thanks, Lori. We do have a question, and I think you've touched on it some, which is wonderful, but I'm glad you made some space here for it too. The question's from Edith Callahan, and she says, "Hello, Lori. Very nice to see you again after so many years, and very nice to meet you, Ra. As you speak about interpersonal, I was wondering if you could speak more about power. It seems that generally our society has a rather thin and unthoughtful relationship to power."
And Ra, I wonder if, like, when this is available, if you and I also just write a little piece on this together, because we wanted to go here more into the power, and I would love to do a little, just write on this in our own comments to power. But you go first. I saw you open your mouth, so I'll step back.
I mean, I think it's such a brilliant question. We have got to heal the mythology of human hierarchy. And that's really what unfortunately has lived at the center of all of our traditional understandings of power. That somehow, based upon a role or a designation or an orientation or an identity, that one of us is in some way superior to another of us. And we operate out of those dynamics, whether consciously or subconsciously. And so much of our mind, body, spirit, energy um, is consumed with the navigation of those relationships and that pecking order and that hierarchy, that often we don't even get an opportunity to really see one another for who we are. And so I appreciate this question, because I think part of the practice is to begin to work with what is it to really see another's humanity outside of role, outside of orientation, outside of um, some of the structures that may deliver a very different perception of who another is. And so in our interpersonal work together, we have to acknowledge that we're coming from that. We have to acknowledge that even with our best intentions, that's seeping in. And we have to acknowledge that the agreement, or even establish the agreement to consciously working through that, to consciously and collectively challenge that as we engage, so that we can really get to a place of real trust and real connection, as well as a place of really seeing the fullness of all of who we are. I go back to Lori's statement about wholeness. I think that's what the opportunity is here. To practice. And I do want to say that we have to call it out, because until we can call it out, we really have no room or space to begin to work through. So I think Lori may have frozen again, but Travis, hopefully that answer was helpful. And
It was so beautiful. We say here, you know, we lead relationally before positionally, as a practice, as a team practice or a group practice within work. What does that mean? To get to know each other, to know something about our families, like to ask questions and of each other that connect us to the quality of our relationship, right?
we will definitely, she and I will definitely write something in our comment section about power, because I also will say that I think these are new conversations for us, particularly in the work context. Um, but I would find even in the personal context that we're not talking a lot about power. We're not in the ways that we could be, and really examining how we're defining it, how we're locating ourselves in relationship to it, where we want to be, how we want to have power or not have power. I think there's so much available if we could lean more into these conversations. Thank you again, Edith, so much for your question. Yes. Okay, question. Yes. Travis, I was going to say if there's another question. So here's, aha, you're ready to move to the calls to action. Okay, so I'm going to take this over because I think Lori is frozen. Hopefully, I'm seeing notes. Julie, this will work. Um, but the work of shared leadership is available to you. So I do want to encourage you all to please reach out, please be in conversation with the Global Roundtable Leadership community. Um, and there are links being put in the chat. Thank you so much, Julie. So we are sharing on our side in terms of the work that we're doing at Move the Crowd with White Awakening. We are sharing our conversation with William Ury about these very specific conversations. And for those of you who don't know who William Ury is, he is the father of win-win negotiation and the co-author of the book Getting to Yes. And so you'll have an opportunity to hear him reflect on this conversation in the context of everything that we're talking about is this new frontier of leadership. And then we are also putting in the links for the Global Roundtable Shared Leadership Work. It's an online 8-week course for teams who are ready for cultural transformation. And you can sign up for them and join the email list. And again, check the link in the chat. It's leadtogether.team/journey. And yes, you all, and I'm hoping that you all will continue to lean into this work. I hope you'll continue to lean into the series. It's been such a joy to be here with you all today. And I want to give a big shout out to the Global Roundtable Leadership team, continuing to, lean in. And I think this is all part of the vision and the work that you all so beautifully hold in the world. And so just thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for allowing us, Lori and I, to be in this incredible conversation today.
Again, you just handled that so beautifully and sharing leadership and power and space between us and meaning. And so thank you, Rha, for showing up, and that this foundations of sharing leadership is a practice-based learning journey for teams that we will be offering this fall. At some point this fall is our hope. And please continue to check out Rha's work. But more than anything, let's all continue to work together on this great awakening of leadership and how we share leadership power, meaning, and responsibility. Thank you, everyone, and blessings to you. You take great care. We'll see you again.